was a crime that broke the city's heart. Now the suspects in the Junior Guzman-Feliz murder case are facing justice and the evidence. Pix 11's Mary Murphy takes you inside the Junior trial.
Good evening, I'm Mary Murphy, and I have to thank you for joining me tonight. What a day in the Bronx. Finally, Michael Sosa Reyes, one of the first witnesses to turn himself into police in the Junior case, actually the first cooperating witness, finally on the stand, testifying. He's the reason why the police were able to round up so many suspects in a relatively short period of time. We've waited nearly a year to hear what he has to say. He's been in protective custody, and finally we saw him in person in the courtroom at Bronx Supreme Court. Very, very compelling testimony. I have to say, though, that he seemed less nervous than the other big witness in this case, Kevin Alvarez, who actually just made a plea agreement maybe about a month ago. He had pleaded guilty to manslaughter 1 a couple of weeks before the trial and did seem nervous on the stand. Of course, he was a very important witness as well. He identified a lot of the alleged stabbers of Junior, and he spent a couple of days on the stand a couple of weeks ago. Now, Sosa Reyes, the person that was sort of the mystery man in all of this, we recognized him from the surveillance footage. He was finally in court wearing a button-down shirt, very crisply dressed, did not look like a gang member. Let me play the story I did for 6 p.m. so you get a little sense of what happened in court. The NYPD kept the media back so it could safely transport the original star witness in the Junior case away from the courthouse. Michael Sosa Reyes was number 2 in the bodega door last June 20th, pursuing 15-year-old Junior, admitting on the stand, "I lied, saying he had done something to my grandmother, so the guy who worked at the bodega would let us get at Junior." But then Reyes famously made the decision to walk away. At the moment that I saw Junior's face, I saw him scared, and he reminded me of a person I had seen previously. When I saw his face, my attitude changed. Junior's mother and father were listening intently in court, along with the slain teen's sister Genesis, who had posted on social media that she and Junior had met Michael Reyes at a party once. They heard some ugly testimony. Reyes testified he saw Jose Muniz, whom he knew as Diente, attacking Junior with a machete. He saw other defendants running toward Junior with knives, he said. And Reyes referred to the guy with the red hat, identified by prosecutors as Jonaiki Martinez Estrella, as someone who got into his white Acura after the assault. He quoted the red hat guy talking about the victim. He said, "He's not going to eat for a good long time because I hit him in the neck." On June 21st, Reyes said he got scared when he realized Junior was dead, so he wanted advice from his mom. I decided to take a flight to Santo Domingo to explain to her what happened. After talking to my mom, she told me that I had to come back and confront my consequences. And we were pretty much the first to report last June that Sosa Reyes was in the door very early at the police precinct in the early hours of June 23rd, just about 2.5 days after Junior was killed. He was in there cooperating with the police using Facebook to make some identifications. It came out in court today that Sosa Reyes's mother made a call to the police from the Dominican Republic and said to expect him at the precinct, that he was flying back. So essentially, he flew out June 21st, the day after Junior was killed. He said he was scared when he found out that Junior had died, and he said that, people would think I'm involved in a murder, so he wanted to seek counsel from his mother. So he flew out June 21st, but he flew back June 22nd, which was a Friday. And then in the early hours of Saturday, June 23rd, he was in the precinct. And by June 24th, Kevin Alvarez, I think, had turned himself in with his attorneys present. And also, they rounded up a bunch of suspects in Paterson, New Jersey, and that was testified to earlier this week. Let me show some footage of the family, Junior's family. His mother and father and his sister were in court today. His mother returning after just over a week. She had had an emotional breakdown a week ago Thursday after she saw some surveillance footage of Junior hiding under a sink. She started screaming in court in front of the jury, banging her fists. She said it was a breakdown. And so she had stayed home for a week. Junior's father came yesterday when there was testimony about his bloody clothing that had been picked up at the hospital by an officer from the 48th Precinct. And it was significant that Junior's sister, I think, was there today. But here's the footage from yesterday. We're recapping the week for you. And Junior's father was alone yesterday, and that was him leaving after watching the items of blood-soaked clothing shown to the jury. They were ripped because I guess the emergency personnel were trying to get to Junior and try to save his life. And so the clothes were so bloodied that they soaked through the evidence bag and they had to be re-vouchered. That's what the detective testified yesterday. Let me go back to footage of the family again, because it wasn't just Junior's mother and father. His sister Genesis was there, a very pretty girl, and she had not really been attending the trial, but she came today, and she had posted on social media within the last week about the fact that she knew Michael Reyes. She had met him at a party, and she mentioned that Junior and another brother had met Reyes at a party. So she was there with her mother and stepfather watching the testimony today. It was pretty intense. A bit different than Kevin Alvarez. Different information came out. Let me talk about the cars. It turns out that Michael Sosa Reyes owned the white Acura, and we have seen that a lot on the videos. There was a black Acura involved, the gray Honda Accord, and then the gray Acura that Kevin Alvarez drove, his mother's car. What was interesting to me is that 3 out of the 4 cars did not belong to the Los Shures set. We've heard so much about that division of the Trinitarios. You know, that sort of dominated the coverage here, the Los Shures set. A lot of the people arrested were from Los Shures. But it turns out 3 out of the 4 cars belonged to members of the Bad Boys, another division of the Trinitarios, and Michael Sosa Reyes belonged to the Bad Boys. So I found that interesting today. He also said that, you know, the cars sort of broke up during the chase. Kevin Alvarez was in that gray Acura. He saw Kevin Alvarez try to cut Junior off and block him by St. Barnabas Hospital so that Junior could not run into the hospital grounds to safety. You know, I say, ironically, tragically, Junior's mother worked in that hospital in the intensive care unit, and she still does. But anyway, Sosa Reyes saw Kevin Alvarez try to block Junior, and then Sosa Reyes testified today that the guy in the car with him, Philly, he told Philly to try to grab the kid. But he said then Junior just was running too fast. So Junior got to the bodega and ran behind the counter. And, you know, that's when Sosa Reyes was one of the first people in the door. Kevin Alvarez went in, and then there's Sosa Reyes in the black shirt and the black hat. And then, as I mentioned in the piece that we did, he saw Junior's face. I'm going to read a little bit more about what he said. You know, he admitted that he lied and that he told the guy, oh, you know, he hurt my grandmother. And then he said another guy with the green do-rag said the same thing. Oh, yeah, he hurt my grandmother. And the guy at the bodega they were hoping would let us get at Junior. And, you know, as I mentioned earlier, when the prosecutor asked him, why did you leave? He said, at that moment that I saw Junior's face, I saw him scared, and he reminded me of a person I had seen previously. When I saw his face, my attitude changed because he reminded me of a person that I had seen before. He said, did you see Junior again? And Reyes testified when they dragged him out, Kevin and the guy with the green do-rag. He was fighting for his life. He mentioned a guy, Diente, that was later identified in court as Jose Muniz, one of the 5 defendants on trial for Murder 1. He mentioned Wolfenito, who is another defendant on trial for Murder 1. He actually said that he saw Muniz with the machete, and he said that he was one of the first to attack Junior on the sidewalk. He saw him grabbing him. He called him Diente and Risa. He said that seeing the attack had a very bad effect on him. He said, I see Diente pulling and grabbing him and with his other hand attacking him with the machete. And then he mentioned other defendants in the case. I saw Manuel getting close to him with a knife. And he did not know the last name of Manuel, but one of the defendants is Manuel Rivera. But what's interesting about the whole thing with Manuel Rivera, when the prosecutor asked, did you see what Manuel did with the knife? Reyes said, no, I didn't. And sort of the same thing happened with the other suspect, Antonio Rodriguez Hernandez Santiago, known as Wolfenito. He said he saw him running toward Junior with a knife, and prosecutor said, did you see what happened? He said, no. The one person, well, he actually, I think, saw two people attacking Junior, according to his testimony. The one person he said he saw him do something with a knife was the guy that had his face covered. Prosecutors have identified that defendant as Elvin Garcia. So we have some footage of him. You know, he had the covering on his face, according to the prosecution in this case. And the quote is, "I saw him running towards Junior, and I saw him attacking him with a knife." Then the prosecutor asked about the guy with the red hat. He did not know the name of the guy with the red hat, but later he's been identified as Janaiki Martinez Estrella, the person who inflicted the lethal wound on Junior, slicing his jugular vein, according to the prosecution. We're expecting the autopsy results to be announced in court next week. But he said the guy in the red hat was running towards Junior with a knife in his hand, but he didn't see what he did. And he said that Junior was on the floor yelling and trying to move around away from him. He said, "I'm in the middle of the street looking back, running towards my car." And this is also a point in the testimony when Reyes said he gave a warning to the other gang members after he had left the bodega. Here's the quote: "Take the guys out of there, they have cameras." And apparently within seconds, that's when Kevin Alvarez was dragging Junior out onto the sidewalk with another person who had the green do-rag. And that person is supposed to face trial at a later date. So, you know, there was a lot of focus on Janaiki. The prosecutor asked, "Did you see the person in the red hat earlier in the night?" And earlier in the night, they had been by Diego Suero's house. Two sets of the gang, two sets of the Trinitarios, the Bad Boys and Los Shures. And Reyes testified that Diego Suero was the head of Los Shures. He remembered going to a deli on the corner by Suero's house, and he said the guy in the red hat, he saw him by the deli. And he said they all went back by Suero's house. I'm not sure if we still have the footage of Diego Suero. I work with, there he is, Andrea Cavalier is our producer. We have so much footage. He said that Suero was there with the leader of Bad Boys, and they kind of stood around in a circle, and they kind of got the order of what they were supposed to do, because they were hunting for members of Sunset, a rival faction. And here's the quote: "Go after Sunset. You already know what you have to do." And another quote from Reyes: "If you have a gun, you shoot. If you have a knife, you stab. If you have a machete, you use the machete." He said, "I went to my car." He didn't indicate that he had any weapon, and he said that Kevin Alvarez did not have a weapon. But he remembered when they came upon Junior. He said he was walking, looking down at his phone. I think we have some photos of Junior that we've been showing over the last year. He was only 15 years old, just getting out of sophomore year in high school. And he said that someone said, "Papo," from the car in front of mine. And then he said of Junior, this is something new, he said he raised his hand, he answered the 7. Then everything happened so fast. Then all I hear was, "Oh," expletive, and then he started running. They started to follow him on foot, running. The other car stopped at St. Barnabas, and that was the Los Shures car, and that's the one that's been identified as belonging to Kevin Alvarez. And as I mentioned before, he wanted his friend Philly to grab Junior, and the quote is, "The kid was running too fast." He didn't know where the two other cars had gone, but then he saw them back near the bodega. "Did you see any weapons?" The guy with the red hat, he said, "in his hand." And he said he didn't see weapons in the hands of Kevin or the guy with the do-rag. And I've already told you about what he said about what happened inside the bodega, that they lied about what, Junior had allegedly done to the grandmother, which was not true. I'm going to go back a little bit to talk about Sosa Reyes. We can show this footage. He said he was a gang member since the age of 16. He joined the Bad Boys when he was 16, and that year was 2014. He said he was talking in Spanish. He said he knows some English, but he didn't feel comfortable testifying in English, so there was an interpreter pretty much sitting next to him on the witness stand. I noticed at least 3 interpreters working with him during the course of this first day that he was on the stand. When he was asked about the boss of the Bad Boys, he was saying something about Flaco Loco. He said La Primero, meaning the first, meaning the number one in charge of Bad Boys. He said that Flaco Loco was there with Diego Suero, the number one for Los Chures. Diego Suero has been charged with murder in the second degree in connection with this case. He's supposed to be tried at a later date. His building was at 167th Street and Boston Road, and that's where they all gathered around in a circle and made plans to go after rivals from Sunset. He explained some of the nicknames. He said Diente, the one that Muniz is the one who was called Diente, and the prosecutor said, what does that mean? I know we have pictures of Muniz, and he said the way he has his teeth, it sort of stands for dentist. He said he had met Diente in 2016, and he said that he was a member of Los Chures. So here are people now that are writing about Sosa's testimony today. Someone's asking, Crystal Bastidas, is Sosa in jail? That's not totally clear because he's in protective custody. That much I was told. I believe he left in a car that had all blacked out windows, and I believe mostly he's being held in protective custody. And he's been told, and there you see it, that's at the side of the courthouse. The police department kept us all the way back. They didn't want us anywhere near the garage or anyone making an exit from the building. There were a couple of ambulances that were out in the back, and we were not allowed anywhere near any of the exit points of the building, while crucial witness was leaving. Ingrid Gonzalez writing, my heart is in pain to see how people have lost humanity and killed that young boy, Junior. Another person, Christina Marie, saying he left. He could have told somebody that boy needs help. And someone saying that's true. Sarah Alice Carmen's 2 different set. He knew everybody was armed with weapons. Another person, Nancy, Brooklyn Boss Queen, why leave to DR, meaning the Dominican Republic? Another, Kenya Gonzalez, this trial is taking too long. Honestly, they slaughtered a child like an animal, and everything is on video. A lot of people think that you can rely solely on video to make a case. I mean, I guess you could, but technically, in any trial, it's always good to have corroborative testimony. And what Kevin Alvarez and Michael Sosa Reyes have brought to the plate is that they kind of knew the whole backstory. They knew what went into this chase, why it started, what these guys were looking for. And Sosa Reyes also talked about this code that some of these gang members use to sort of weed out people that are not in their group. And it was the code 1090. And he said about his leader from Bad Boys, Flaco Loco, has told us to use the 1090 code to identify ourselves among ourselves. And he said, I said that was an order to do any type. And I mentioned about if you have a gun, you shoot. If you have a knife, you stab. He said Philly got into his car, and when the prosecutor asked how many more cars were there, he said in Spanish, tres más, meaning 3 more. And he said that 3 of them belonged to the Bad Boys. So that was kind of a new revelation because we always were talking about Los Chures. I'm looking at some of your other statements here. And Senya Medina's writing, protective custody only lasts so long. A lot of people watching and commenting tonight, even though it's a Friday night. A lot of you are sticking with us and commenting on the case. Gigi Cass said 7 is the gang. So, when we heard that comment in court from Sosa Reyes, he said of Junior that he held his arm up in the air and he said the 7, we didn't know what that was and it wasn't clarified. We don't know what the defense attorneys are going to do on Monday because the cross-examination will start on Monday of this crucial witness, and there are 5 defense attorneys, and so I'm sure they're going to have some very interesting questions. They've already tried to suggest that Junior had ties to the Sunset. They actually had this photo that they showed up previously in the trial called Sunset Gunset, and they showed different people in the photo at various times and tried to say that it was Junior in the photo. But today, Sosa Reyes testified that someone had said the guy on the end of the photo, on the left side of the photo, was Junior. And he said when he saw the guy in the bodega hiding behind the counter, terrified, he said, that's not the guy who was in the photo. So it seems that Reyes somehow
had an encounter with Junior earlier, perhaps at this party that Junior's sister spoke about. But it was very, very compelling when he said, at the moment that I saw Junior's face, I saw him scared. And it reminded me of a person I had seen previously. And that sort of made him stop in his tracks, leave the bodega, stop trying to fight to get Junior from behind the counter. And then he went outside and he said he was starting to go toward his car, but he yelled out to the other gang members, "Get those guys out of there. They have cameras." And we know because of those cameras, that's how the police were so successful in getting a lot of these guys identified. But if Sosa Reyes had not gone into the precinct and assisted with the identifications, really, who knows what would have happened with this case. Kevin Alvarez did not come in as a witness until months and months and months later. And we didn't know that he was going to be a witness until about a week or so before the trial started. But Kevin Alvarez was entrenched in Los Shures, and that's where a lot of these suspects came from. He said he was a probationary member, was only with them 4 months, but he knew a lot of the guys that were involved in this case. So he obviously, the prosecution felt that he was an invaluable witness and made a deal with him that he would plead guilty to manslaughter first degree. And if he didn't testify truthfully, Alvarez said he could get 25 years in prison. If the prosecution is satisfied with his testimony in this and future trials, he's going to have the manslaughter 1 charge dropped, and he will just do time served for conspiracy in the 4th degree. It seems apparent that Alvarez did more in terms of hurting Junior than Sosa Reyes did. I mean, Sosa Reyes did chase him, but he left when he saw Junior behind the counter, and too bad that the other 2 guys that were with him did not leave as well. So Sosa Reyes said today, when the prosecutor asked him about his plea deal, he also pleaded guilty to manslaughter 1, but it sounds like the deal is slightly different. He didn't plead guilty to conspiracy like Alvarez did. And basically he said that if the prosecution is satisfied with his testimony, the prosecutor is the one who actually brought it up, his charges will be dismissed. So that's different than time served. So that's essentially what happened today. Other stuff that stood out this week, because we're doing a slight recap, earlier in the week, Elvin Garcia's girlfriend testified. She didn't seem very happy to be on the stand. She seemed very uncomfortable, and she said the night of Junior's murder, he called her late June 20th, asked her to come over to his house. He had a hole in his hand, she said. And she said the next day he pointed to this image when the Bodega videos were coming out and said, that was him. That was him in the image. The 2 of them went to Philadelphia, she said, to his uncle's house. And then he came back on June 24th. Police called him, and he was brought into custody and eventually arrested. And now he's facing the murder first-degree charges. So really quite a compelling week in court. A lot happened. The judge is trying to move the trial along because there have been delays. The prosecutor has said she hopes to wrap by next Friday. And then technically it would be the defense's turn if the defense team decides that it's going to put on witnesses. The defense has the option of just relying on cross-examination of all these prosecution witnesses. And if it pokes enough holes in the case, the defense can hope that maybe that'll have some impact on the jury. So it remains to be seen whether there will be defense witnesses. But we do know that the defense has vigorously cross-examined a lot of the prosecution witnesses. Prosecutor says she hopes by next Friday she'll be wrapped. If there are no defense witnesses, it could go to closing arguments the week after that. But this has been a trial marked by delays. This trial was supposed to start on February 11th. And then the defense said it needed more time to get ready. And one defense lawyer had a long-planned family vacation. So 3 months later, the trial started. So somehow delays impact everyone, even me. And I'll tell you more about that next week. But anyway, really some week in court. And I appreciate you joining me tonight and all the interaction we've had on all the different platforms, on Facebook and on Instagram and Twitter, and of course on pix11.com. And I'll be there again on Monday, cross-examination of SOSA, Michael Sosa Reyes. We'll show his picture one more time. The first cooperating witness in this case. He will be back on the stand on Monday, and we are going to be eager to see what the defense has in store for him, what kind of questions. Thank you again for being here tonight. Hope you have a nice weekend, and I'll see you from court on Monday. Good night.